You know, some life stories are so wild they sound like they're ripped straight from a Hollywood script. Well, John McAfee's story is one of those. We're talking about a guy who was part tech genius, part paranoid mastermind, and a full-time rebel who took on some of the biggest powers on the planet. His life wasn't just unbelievable, it was a masterclass in sheer audacity.
Just to give you a little taste of what we're dealing with here, this is a man who, believe it or not, apparently faked his own death, and not just once, twice. And it doesn't stop there. He also managed to stay one step ahead of the FBI and a whole bunch of international agencies for a year and a half.
Now, you might be picturing him hiding out in some dingy bunker, right? Nope. He did all this while living it up on a massive yacht in the Caribbean.
And here's the kicker. The whole time, he was openly mocking them on Twitter, sometimes practically giving them his location. So how on earth did one man stay free for so long, playing a game of cat and mouse with the entire world? Well, that's what we're going to find out.
So let's dive in. Where did this all begin? Well, McAfee's journey as an international fugitive really kicked off with one single, violent incident that just completely spiraled out of control.
Okay, picture this, November 2012, at his compound deep in the Belizean jungle. First, his dogs are poisoned, and he's furious, blaming his neighbor. The very next day, a single gunshot echoes through the night. And the morning after that, his neighbor, Gregory Fall, is found dead. Shot, execution style. By the time the police show up to ask some questions, McAfee is gone, vanished. So you gotta ask, right? How did we get here? How did the guy who literally invented the software that protects our computers end up as the #1 suspect in a murder mystery? To figure that out, we've got to rewind a bit.
See, long before he was a fugitive, John McAfee was basically royalty in Silicon Valley. He was the guy who tamed the Wild West of the early internet. Back in the late 80s, he created one of the very first antivirus programs. He built a whole empire, and it made him an absolute fortune. But for a guy who seemed to thrive on chaos, corporate life was like a cage. So in 1993, he cashed out, sold his shares for a cool $100 million, and just walked away.
And this rebellious streak, it wasn't anything new. I mean, this was a guy who got himself kicked out of a PhD program for sleeping with his professor's daughter. He got fired from jobs for showing up high. He was always pushing back against the rules.
And then came the 2008 financial crash. It absolutely demolished his fortune. We're talking a drop from over $100 million down to just $4 million. For McAfee, this was the ultimate proof. It just confirmed everything he already believed, that governments and big institutions were basically just scams designed to take away your freedom.
So what did he do? He packed his bags and moved to Belize, a place with no IRS, no extradition treaty. He was going to build his own little kingdom where he was the only one in charge.
And his new life in Belize? Wow. It became this wild spectacle of paranoia and pure excess. He built this compound, right, hired armed ex-cons as his personal security, and basically started picking fights with everyone, from local gangsters to his own neighbors. He wasn't just living in paradise. He was turning it into his own private fortress.
This all blew up in April 2012. Belize's elite tactical unit, the Gang Suppression Unit, storms his property. They kill one of his dogs, arrest him, and throw him in this disgusting jail cell, only to let him go without any charges. After that, something inside him just snapped. McAfee became completely convinced the government was trying to kill him, and his paranoia just shot into overdrive. So after his neighbor turns up dead, McAfee's paranoia and his genius just fuse together, and they turn him into one of the most creative fugitives you've ever heard of.
So he escapes Belize by boat and makes his way to Guatemala. But here's the thing. He couldn't stay out of the spotlight. He grants this big, exclusive interview to Vice magazine, and they post this triumphant photo of him, thinking he's in the clear. What they didn't realize was they had just made an absolutely catastrophic mistake.
So why was it a mistake? Because of a little thing called EXIF data. See, hidden inside that digital photo file were the exact GPS coordinates of the hotel where the picture was taken. In one single click, his precise, real-time location was just beamed out to every law enforcement agency in the world.
So of course, he's immediately arrested. They're about to deport him right back to Belize, which, in his mind, was a death sentence. So what does he do? He fakes a massive heart attack right there in his jail cell. I mean, he was so convincing it stopped the entire deportation process cold. The whole stunt created so much chaos and legal mess that the Guatemalan government basically just gave up and shipped him back to the USA instead. He literally outsmarted an entire country.
But of course, he wasn't safe for long. By 2019, after years of not paying a dime in taxes, the IRS finally indicted him. So he did what he does best. He ran. This time he took off on his yacht, leading the IRS on this wild 18-month chase all around the Caribbean, turning his life as a fugitive into a kind of bizarre performance art.
But, no matter how clever you are, every chase has to come to an end. After all those years on the run, the net was finally closing in.
In October of 2020, it happened. He was arrested at the airport in Barcelona. The game was up. He spent the next 8 months sitting in a Spanish prison waiting to be extradited. Then, on June 23, 2021, the court gave the final approval. Just a few hours later, he was found dead in his cell.
But this is where the story takes one last, really dark twist. Months before he died, McAfee posted this exact tweet. He explicitly says he would never commit suicide, and he even references the very suspicious death of Jeffrey Epstein. It's almost like he was planting the seeds for one final, massive controversy.
And so naturally, two completely different narratives pop up. You have the official story, which is suicide, and it was confirmed by an autopsy, but then you have his followers, and even his own wife, who are convinced he was silenced, that he was murdered because he had incriminating files on powerful people.
In the end, John McAfee was a man who built an empire on fighting digital viruses and then lived his own life like a virus in the system, a defiant outlaw. He was caught, yes, but he never actually stood trial. Which leaves us with one last, nagging question. For a man who swore he would never, ever be caged, was this the only escape he had left?